Hey, Shelby, it's great to have you back again. I love these catch-ups that we have. Someone was asking me the other day, what does it really mean to have these observing systems and what does that mean on the Great Lakes? Well, at the Great Lakes Observing System, GLOS, we know that that usually means giant yellow buoys or even smaller yellow buoys that are floating around or moored in the Great Lakes, observing and capturing all this amazing information that we end up putting on Seagull. It can also mean things taped to the end of your dock or mounted on the coastline or webcams and other stuff. But I was also thinking there's got to be other stuff that's not just on the surface. Tell me more.
You know, Tim, that's a pretty good hunch. I have to break it to you. They're also yellow, but they fly under the water and they're called gliders. I could tell you about them, but I think it would be best to hear it directly from one of the Great Lakes glider pilots, Lydia Paulic, over at University of Windsor's RAEON. We took a tour a little bit ago, and we look forward to sharing this information with you.
RAEON stands for the Real-Time Aquatic Ecosystem Observation Network. We were funded by what's called the CFI, the Canadian Foundation for Innovation, and also the Province of Ontario in 2018. It was a $17 million investment, which allowed us to purchase a lot of the equipment that you see here. The idea behind RAEON is that we provide instrumentation, data management, and also expertise to Canadian researchers who are interested in using some of this more state-of-the-art equipment. So we kind of have a big instrument pool that we are able to loan out to researchers and in some cases researchers in the US as well. It's a very, very small fee, and then obviously we provide the expertise for deploying the equipment and downloading the data and getting the data onto GLOS, which is a huge part of RAEON, is that our data is open access through GLOS.
So here we have our G3 Slocum Glider. This is a Generation 3 Slocum Glider. And a Slocum Glider is just a buoyancy-driven underwater vehicle. It's actually classified as an autonomous underwater vehicle. And it's interesting because it is buoyancy-driven, so most people have gliders that are mechanically driven with an actual motor, but ours is just buoyancy. So there's a piston in front of here in the nose cone that moves back and forth, and it's water driven. So as water comes in these little plugs and filters out, it can actually move the piston inside, and it's all based on density. So if you want the glider to go up or down, the water will come in or out. The piston moves back and forth depending on if you're going up or if you're going down in pitch. So basically it uses the water, the density of the water within it and around it to drive itself forward. It has two wings, which aren't currently on, but they sit right here, and the wings actually create lift throughout that whole process. And as you go up and down, those movements are actually called yaws, and going from point A to point B is an entire transect. So you can basically calculate how many yaws you want the glider to do up and down before it gets to point B from point A. Again, you have your science bay, and this controls all the science, all the water quality aspects of it. And in the back here, we have our navigation stuff. So the rudder is kind of broken down into A being a rudder and B being a communication for a satellite. So we have iridium satellites on top here. So basically when the glider is at the surface of the water, the tail is sticking up, and you can inflate. There's a little air bladder in the back of the tail here. I don't know if you can see it down underneath, that inflates, and it'll kind of stick its tail up in the water, up in the air from the water, and it connects via satellite, and that's how we are able to talk to it, essentially. It'll give you like a rundown, a status update of what it's seen so far, what it's currently doing, and at this point it can either continue on the path that you currently have set for it, or you can change your mind and say, oh, if they're, say you're tracking fish, you can say the fish are going in this direction, let's change your path and go this way now to follow the fish. And so that's our iridium on top here. At the end, we do have a propeller for when we do get into, say, heavy currents and stuff, and the glider is not able to correctly move or navigate itself through the water. So if it say it surfaces and it's a waypoint that it surfaced at is, you know, say 1 kilometer, 2 kilometers off of where it was supposed to be, it can determine that itself and say, okay, I need to overcorrect now to get myself back on track. Or you can say without using the propeller, or you can say if you want to get it back on track yourself, you can say, okay, turn on your prop, and get there as soon as you can if you want to, again, track fish or look at some kind of algal bloom that's currently taking place or just anything going on physiochemically. Quite slow. It's about 1 kilometer an hour, so you get 24 kilometers in a day. Yeah, the prop does help, but again, it's very system and location dependent. So if you're working in a very wavy system or it's really wavy that day and currents are really high, obviously you want to be a little bit more cautious with it. So you might turn the prop on, you might surface less so you're not getting caught up in the, in the upper currents and stuff, and just kind of push its way through and just make it to the next waypoint as soon as possible without getting lost, but still collecting all that good data. These are actually called finder tags. So they're about the size of a V16, and basically all this does is if you lose the glider, these tags will start pinging, and all the receivers that are in the Great Lakes will pick up this finder tag ID, and you can pinpoint where you lost that glider and where it currently is. These are the two little connectors. You have power and then you have comms. So currently we have just 2 dummy plugs in right now. If we wanted to actually turn the glider on, you would plug in your comms first, and then once you have everything set up, this has to be completely sealed before you can go ahead and put the power plug, the actual power plug in to turn it on. Each of these hydrophones, one does 69 kilohertz, this one, and one does 180 kilohertz. So the 69 kilohertz will pick up fish tags that are operating on the 69 kilohertz frequency, and then the same thing for the 180 kilohertz fish. They're actually on pointing backwards. They should be pointing forwards towards the nose because the glider moves forwards, so you want to detect fish in the direction that you're moving. The 180 is actually really special, more so for my bloater work, because there isn't a large 180 kilohertz array in majority of the Great Lakes. It's typically 69 kilohertz dominant. So when people or when groups deploy a 180 kilohertz array, you're usually only covering a very small area of the lake in comparison to the 69s. So when you deploy the glider, you can actually extend your 180 coverage because you're getting 180 detections on this, right? But it's actually moving. So it's a little bit different, but regardless, you're still extending your coverage to bolster your data set essentially. So yeah, this is our winch hook essentially. So whenever you look at the glider, this is the safest point to lift it up from, just because the weight distribution when you ballast it and everything has to be balanced correctly. So you don't want to lift, say, from the nose and have everything go sliding, and this is not a safe anchor point essentially to lift from. The glider itself weighs around 250 pounds without any of the extended bays on it. You can see the length of it is like about 2 meters without any of those bays. We can open up the glider, and basically all this does, there's pins that run along the length of the body from about here to here. And all they do is they're just anchoring pins, so they just holds it all together in place. So all we do is we pop these open, we expand them a little bit to fit the new bay in, and then we just seal it back up. Once it's back together, there's a lot of additional work that you have to do to ballast it. A lot of functional checkout procedures that you must do to ensure that it's reading correctly and operating correctly, but also that it's balanced. And we do that both in lab mode, where it's on the cart, or in our fiberglass tank, which is actually around the corner. So we put this in the tanks in the water, and we do our own kind of lab test to make sure that it's not sitting, nose down or nose up, depending on what bays are in and everything. I should note that there is an eco puck on the bottom of this. No matter what you're doing with the glider, you're always going to be collecting water chemistry. You're looking at dissolved oxygen, which is actually in the tail cone. You have dissolved oxygen, pressure, depth, temperature, and then this will do all your fluorescent stuff. So you're looking at CDOM, phycocyanin, blue-green algae, and chlorophyll A, which is a big one too. You can't, unfortunately, run your acoustic telemetry with your AZFP bay and your VR4 offload modem, because the VR4 offload modem is actually the same size as this without this portion here. So it can only get so large, but also it's such a huge drain on the battery. and on the science computer, because everything just gets stored on a hard drive inside the science computer that you don't want to overload it. It can only hold so much data at one time, right? So unfortunately, you are limited to either looking at the VR4 offload or looking at the AZFP bay. So fish tracking versus AZFP, looking at biomass. We also have a hydroacoustics bay, which again can't really be run at the same time as the other 3 modems or receivers. So it's a little bit, you can kind of pick and choose what you want to use first, but there's always the opportunity to, deploy it, retrieve it, and then switch your bays out, reballast, and then redeploy to look at something else. The longest deployment we've had is about 3 weeks is usually our average. But of course that is also dependent on if you have bays installed as well. And then the AZFP bay, so AZFP stands for Acoustic Zooplankton Fish Profiler. And this essentially just looks at biomass, and it uses fluorescence to do that. All the upgrades have been done. It's got new science upgrades. We actually had a connection installed from the science bay essentially to insert a secondary bay, which is called a VR4 offload modem, which is not currently on here, but it would sit in front of here or behind here. That's the nose. And basically that would allow us to go down deep into the water in the Great Lakes and interrogate our VR4 receivers. So we can download data from those VR4 receivers because they're deployed over 5 years, and we don't want to wait 5 years to get that data back. So we send these guys down, they interrogate those receivers, and they come back up with all the offloaded data from that receiver. This is our VR4. It is a acoustic receiver that we use in all of the Great Lakes. It does 69 and 180 kilohertz frequency detections for fish tags, but also any other species that are tagged. These are intended for waters deeper than about 200 meters so that you can put them out for a long period of time collecting data without having to go out and service them or maintain them or recover them as frequently as you would a smaller receiver. A lot easier, we can send these out multiple times throughout the year to go interrogate those. And that hasn't been done yet in the Great Lakes. The VR4 modem is still quite new. It hasn't been tested yet. We are the first ones to test it. We're going to be doing that this year. So we have experimental testing going on with Russ Miller. And so far nothing is currently underway, but we've got it all set up to go currently. So really excited to do this stuff.
Recently in Seagull, we've developed the ability to add visualization of gliders right in the app. It's so cool, and I can't wait to show it to you once we start ingesting that type of data.